Greetings and salutations, my name is OJ as always, and welcome back to another episode of the DBD-a-thon, a series of videos where I go over every single killer in Dead by Daylight from Trapper all the way up to the now not so recently released Springtrap. I cover their lore, aka just reading their in-game bio, their gameplay / power, their perks, their design, as well as my favourite and least favourite cosmetics for them. And with that small explanation out of the way, our object of obsession today is none other than SilentHill's PyramidHead. Now, as I like to start off every single one of these videos, I'm going to be reading his in-game bio, because, fun fact, I'm not a lore guy. If you're looking for lore, I'd suggest go watch Pixelbush, because he makes really good videos on the lore of specific killers and Dead by Daylight in general. But, with that said, PyramidHead's in-game bio reads as such: a sadistic and merciless executioner, PyramidHead is fixated on dispensing punishment through pain. Encumbered by the steel frame upon his head, and with a hulking great blade in tow, he stalked the hellish corridors of SilentHill, committed to a duty that no one truly understood. Where he trod, even monsters fled for the shadows, and those who crossed his path fell victim to unrestrained acts of aggression. When his duty was complete and his presence no longer needed, he prepared for the long rest, and yet his skills were required elsewhere. The fog that streamed over him was somehow different than what he was accustomed to in SilentHill, as if each wisp contained the nerves of a creature, writhing, seeking him out. There was an unspoken agreement in that moment. The billowing cloud was an invitation to duty and sadism, and PyramidHead, taking a step into the fog, accepted his obligation once more. Now, as you can tell, just like many of these collab killers or licensed killers, he doesn't have much lore, like at all, which is a weird thing I've noticed. I don't remember who pointed it out, but a lot of like licensed survivors usually get like quite long, extensive lore. My best example is Alan Wake, who gets a full explanation of why he's here, what he's doing, and they also indirectly make him the strongest being in the realm outside of the entity. The only thing holding him back is terrible memory. But anyways, PyramidHead's lore is, relatively simple. Gets finished doing his stuff in SilentHill, and the entity calls upon him. Though I do think it's interesting that it's not the entity taking him. PyramidHead enters on its own will. It isn't bound by the entity. It just kind of walks in and is like, oh, you need me to punish some people? You need me to punish some survivors? Yeah, sure, I'll come in. Like, the entity doesn't drag him in. He just walks in, makes himself at home. And, seeing as there isn't much lore to talk about, I'd like to just state my connection to SilentHill. I do this with most of the licensed killers. The only one I didn't do it for was Ghostface, because he's technically an original character, as in that he's not the one from Scream. Also, sorry for the weird cut there, my dog just started barking whilst I was in the middle of a long sentence. How fun. And for some reason my microphone picks it up. But anyways, when it comes to my relation to PyramidHead and SilentHill as a whole, I don't really have any. I've never played the games in any way, shape or form. I do want to play Silent Hill 2's remake, and I know that Silent Hill 1 is getting a remake made by the same people that made the remake for 2. Take a shot every time I say remake, but otherwise I haven't played the series in any way, shape or form. However, PyramidHead does hold a little special place in my heart, specifically because I think his design is, pinpoint perfect. But let's not spoil things too much, right? I'll save that for later. But the reason I do like him as much as I do is that he was kind of the reason I got back into the game. I've said this in, I think, the Trapper video, so the first video in this series. I started playing Dead by Daylight when it came to Xbox through the Special Edition, and when I played it, I was like 12, maybe. It was, 2016, 2017? I would have been like 12, 10, 11, somewhere in that age range, right? And you can imagine a 12-year-old child being shit scared of the game. So, I stopped playing it because I was scared. Even playing as killer was scary to me back then for some reason. I was a proper wuss without any other word for it. But I saw the trailer for the 4th anniversary with PyramidHead in it, and I was like, wow, Dead by Daylight, I haven't had that name in a long time, and I just immediate. I was like, wow, I'm going to come back immediately. PyramidHead literally is the reason I am probably making these videos as I speak, because he dragged me back into the loop of Dead by Daylight, and well, they managed to keep me around with one of my favourite killers ever the next year over. That's a little teaser for a future video, of course. But anyways, with my connection to SilentHill, PyramidHead, and his very short lore read out, I'd like to move on to his gameplay and his power. Now, PyramidHead's power, that's quite a long sentence, that's a tongue twister, can be split into 3 separate sections, that being the Rites of Judgment, the Punishment of the Damned, and the Cages of Atonement. Rites of Judgment is a mode that the PyramidHead can enter by sticking his sword in the ground. When he sticks his sword in the ground, anywhere he moves, he will leave a trail of like barbed wire and blood effect. I don't really know what it is, but it looks very cool. They're called Trails of Torment. No, that's the name of one of his perks. Whoops. Let's call them that actually. Trails of Torment. And when survivors step over these trails, they are inflicted with a status effect that adds like a thingy effect, like a barbed wire effect around their screen. Besides that, I don't think it does anything. But what it does open up to is the ability to be locked into the Cage of Atonement. So if PyramidHead manages to down a survivor who has the weird torment effect on them, he is able to stab his sword into them and send them into a cage, which is basically a hook, but it's as far away as possible, like across the map. It's almost always like as far away as possible from your current position, which weirdly can sometimes be to your detriment, because I have had more than enough times where I've been playing PyramidHead, I send someone to a cage and they're just instantly rescued because they get spawned next to some gen that's got like 2 people on it. One thing to note though is that originally I was going to make a comment that his cages didn't give you endurance or the speed benefit from being unhooked, but due to the recent PTB, they are actually changing that. And speaking of the PTB, I originally was going to have a big section where I complained about his add-ons, because as I've said in previous videos, I don't really use add-ons much, like very rarely, not sure why, but just don't. But his add-ons are just notoriously bad, right? Like everyone knows that that's the worst thing about him. His add-ons are boring, bad, and the only ones you would ever use are like the ones where you get the increased range on his attack, which we'll get to in a minute. But with the PTB, not only did they like buff PyramidHead, but they also gave almost all of his add-ons a rework in some way, shape or form. So thank God I waited to make this video and did some other stuff in the meantime, because well, the video would have been redundant in like a day or 2. But yeah, his add-ons now are actually good and, more importantly, fun. I'm quite fond of the one that breaks pallets on the PTB right now, or the one where you can, make it a sniper rifle and cross-map people. That's cool. But speaking of that cross-map, we have Punishment of the Damned. When his sword is stuck in the ground, the PyramidHead can press the attack button to lift it up out of the ground, sending sort of like a trail of metal spike thing. I don't even know what they are. They're like metal spikes that come out of the ground. They're outlined by this red marking silhouette thingy mabob on the ground as well. They go through walls. I don't know how they interact with terrain, I must admit. I don't know if you can like launch it up a hill. Like I know artists' crows go up hills, but I don't think his power does. I could be wrong though, I'm sure someone will correct me. But this is basically why this part, the Punishment of the Damned, is why he is as strong as he is, at least in my opinion. Because not only is it a projectile that goes through walls, like completely, but it also can hit multiple survivors, which, that's quite a big deal, especially like for something that's kind of simple to use. Obviously there's intricacies around using it, right? But with that power alone, just solely having it in his possession, he can make most loops unsafe. Because where you would think you would be, fine, and you could, like jungle gyms or shack, running around shack can be a genuine like issue against a PyramidHead, because he can just hit you through the walls. He can hit you through the pallet. When you jump the window, he's just gonna hit you. Like, he has the ability to make like 90% of loops unsafe just because he has a power or a damaging attack that goes through walls. It's also probably the most fun part of his power, like the satisfaction you get from like hitting, like predicting where a survivor is going to go and hitting them and downing them. Not many other killers can really capture that satisfaction. It does help that the sound effects for his power are very weighty. Like you can really feel the heft of his blade when you yank it out of the ground, or the sound when you stick it down into the ground. When you're like walking around creating the Trails of Torment, the sound effect of like it's like flesh and metal just scraping together to create the trails. His sound effect work is just insane. It's really good. But anyways, with my compliments to his power delivered, I would like to talk about his teachable perks. The first of said perk is known as Deathbound, with a description reading as such. Those whose lives are intertwined in the darkness are destined to suffer together. When a survivor heals another survivor, they scream and activate Deathbound. When the healer is farther than 12, 8 or 4 meters away from the survivor they healed, they suffer from the Oblivious status effect. This lasts until the healer loses a health state. Oblivious prevents survivors from hearing or being affected by the killer terror radius. And unfortunately, this perk doesn't actually have any flavor text for some reason, at least not off the website I'm reading it off of, right? This perk, for the longest time, I didn't really pay too much mind to it. I didn't really think much of it, etc, etc. However, I don't know if anyone's noticed, but in a few builds in the recent videos, I actually have been using it. I find this perk to be very solid on killers who can injure people quite often and require you to heal. Someone like Legion would benefit quite a lot from this perk because it allows them to have the Actually, would Legion benefit from it? Probably not, actually, because of the Oblivious status effect, because then they wouldn't be affected by the terror radius and then you don't get killer instinct. Scratch what I just said. Let's say the Ghoul, right? The Ghoul doesn't have stuff that requires his terror radius to be particularly important, but this perk could be really solid on him because, well, survivors will be healing quite a lot against Ghoul, because that's kind of just, I think that's kind of what you just should do anyways, right? Unless I'm wrong. I've not really played too much of the Ghoul because, you know, I haven't really been I kind of just started playing again because in preparation for Five Nights at Freddy's. So I have played as Ghoul, I have played as like Houndmaster, but when Houndmaster came out I kind of just stopped playing for a bit. But anyways, I would think this perk would be good because it allows him to get the, you know, jump on people who have been healing. So yeah, I actually kind of like this perk a little. I think I used it in the Deathslinger video, which was last video. Yeah, I like this perk. It's pretty solid, though of course I would admit that there is better ways to gain the Oblivious status effect. Even something as simple as Hex Plaything, or like the Unknown perk that transitions your terror radius to generators. Hell, even PyramidHead himself has a better way of kind of sneaking up on people in one of his other perks, but we'll get to that in a minute, right? But anyways, with that said, we move on to his second perk. Said second perk is Forced Penance, with a description reading as such. Those who stand in the way of duty shall suffer a harsh judgment. Survivors who take a protection hit are inflicted with the Broken status effect for 60, 70 or 80 seconds. Broken prevents survivors from being healed, and just like the last perk, it doesn't have any flavor text. I don't really know what is this perk's game plan. I've never used this perk in my life, so maybe I'm missing something, but it doesn't look very good on paper. It's very rare that you actually get instances where survivors take protection hits outside of what, maybe endgame, I'd argue. I very rarely do survivors actually take protection hits for one another, unless they're obviously like playing with friends or something and they have the communication to do that. Most of the time, though, that's not the case, at least in my experience. So the only time I could see this perk ever having any sort of value would be endgame, where people are obviously just naturally going to try and body block for any injured survivors so they can all escape together. But if that's if you wanted a perk that kind of I don't know. I don't know what the idea behind this perk is. Like, even in an endgame scenario, Terminus is just a better version of this perk, because Terminus makes it so once the endgame starts, any survivors injured are broken, right? So that's just a better thing for late game. So what is the point in this perk, and where does it find its use? 80 seconds of broken is a long time, I will give it that, and that's quite... But unless you can actually apply the pressure to find that broken survivor and take them down, where are you getting the value? And they have to take the protection hit, and more importantly, the game has to register it as a protection hit, which it doesn't always do, right? But anyways, with that said, we move on to his third perk. Said third perk is a personal favourite of mine, Trail of Torment, with a description reading as such. You guide your victims along a path of pain and punishment. After damaging a generator, you become undetectable until the generator stops regressing. During this time, the generator's yellow aura is revealed to all survivors. This effect can trigger only once every 60, 45, or 30 seconds. Undetectable hides the killer's aura, terror radius, and red stain. No flavor text again. This is a really fun perk. However, unfortunately, it does now have competition with I say does now as if it's recent. Unforeseen, the perk from the unknown, has been around for a decent bit now, and it is kind of just a better version of this perk, because not only does it not tell the survivors what generator, but once you kick the generator, the survivors see the aura, they know you have the perk. They know you are undetectable now. And they know that they can go to that generator to get rid of that effect, or just let it regress until it stops, right? So they'll know you'll have undetectable, so they can kind of prepare in advance for that, assuming they know how this perk works, right? But unforeseen is that you just kick a gen and bang, your terror radius is on the gen now. You're undetectable for the next 40 seconds. I do like this perk. I do enjoy it. I used it in the Oni video, and I had a lot of success with it because the survivors were just not touching the gens. So I was a silent Oni flying around the map one-shot downing people, and they couldn't even react in time to stop me. So it can be very strong, and it does have the benefit of lasting potentially for a very long time. But yeah, I feel like Unforeseen is just a genuinely more consistent perk, although I do like both of them. As I've said before, I enjoy any perk that gives me Undetectable or Haste, because I like jump scaring people, and I like moving fast as all hell. But anyways, with that said, we move on to PyramidHead's design / my favourite and least favourite cosmetics for it. Now, as I have said in previous licensed killer videos, when it comes to designs, all of my props must go to the original creators of the characters, because for the most part, the Dead by Daylight versions are just adaptations of the existing kind of portrayals of these characters, and such is the case for none other than PyramidHead. His look, base design wise, is very, very clearly based off of his Silent Hill 2 iteration, which of course is the most iconic version, and I believe the game that he debuted in, if I'm not wrong. However, with the one change that his pyramid looks a bit more flat. I don't know why. I have images of the original game Silent Hill 2 PyramidHead on the side here, and the original game kind of has a more angular design for him. It looks a bit more pointy, but this one is quite clearly flat. Now, speaking of the actual PyramidHead, it itself, not the character, the head on the thing on his head, it is iconic for all the good reasons. It is a striking visual. It is weird, it is odd, it is not normal, and that is befitting of someone who, for the most part, is an otherworldly being of extreme power. It is one of those... I like to think of PyramidHead as this sort of ethereal being that... I mean, look at how he entered the realm. He didn't actually get taken. He entered it himself, which is quite the feat. I'm not sure anyone else has done that outside of, Vecna, I think. He's the only other guy that kind of just came in here. But his design is just perfect. It's wrong, it looks weird, it looks macabre, but it's teetering on this line of looking human. His body is, a tall, muscular, very large man with, an enormous butcher's knife, comically large. both, like, it's a dichotomy of size, right? It looks like a normal human, all things considered, with his actual physical figure, but then it's contrasted by the giant blade that he drags around every step he takes, and the enormous pyramid that removes the humanity from him. This isn't a human being, it's an entity of extreme power. It's a being of just torment. It is designed to punish those who it deems unworthy. At least that's what my intake is from it, without actually really playing the games. I know it's like a manifestation of James's sort of guilt of I'm not going to spoil it, because, you know, I kind of have spoiled myself, but I'm not going to spoil you guys, right? But it's just a perfect design. There is a reason why he's a horror icon, and he deserves it through and through. But with that said, I would like to move on to my favourite cosmetics for the Pyramid Head. Now, as a disclaimer, as I say in every single one of these videos, when it comes to picking my favourite and least favourite cosmetics for a killer, for least favourites, I am not allowed to pick anything below a very rare, because if I could, I'd just pick some terrible yellow recolor. However, in Pyramid Head's case, all he has is very rares. So, with that said, my least favourite skin for him is his blighted skin. Now, Pyramid Head is one of them rare killers who just has good skins across the board. It's just that the blighted one kind of falls short for me because of what they do to the pyramid. I don't really like the weird spikes sticking out of like the front top bits of it. I mean, the rest of him looks, you know, quite cool. It is his default design. I like the small bits of barbed wire that wrap around him. As with every blighted skin, I'm fond of the sort of bulbous, like orange glowy sack things. I'm trying to find the right word. I think it's like sores or bubonic plague looking stuff. I don't know what the name of it is. It escapes me at this moment. But yeah, it's like Pyramid Head's blighted skin isn't bad. It's not bad at all. It's good. Like, don't get me wrong. I just don't like the weird misshapen pyramid. It works, right? It works for what the skin is going for. I just don't like the look of it. But that doesn't mean it's a bad skin in any way. It is a good skin. And you know what? He's one of the few who doesn't really have a bad skin in any way, shape or form, as I just said. But with that said, I'd like to move on to my favourite skin. Said favourite skin is easily and by far the corrupted Pyramid Head skin. This is everything I love about his original design, the sort of remaining humanity covered up by the giant sword and the giant pyramid taken to 11. You can clearly see that this at some point was a human being, but its body is ravaged by barbed wire, rips, tears, hooks, like cuts. It's just all of the gashes and like marks of sort of damage on its body is unbelievably just insane. It looks incredible. It's gory in all of the right ways. The pyramid itself having a bunch of holes, implying that it's breathing through said holes, when both of us know that's not the case. This isn't a human being. But that adds to that fact that this isn't a human, but it's trying to kind of deceive someone in a sense, make it think it is a human, but it isn't. It teeters that weird uncanny valley where it is human but it isn't, and it is genuinely just a fantastic skin. It's the barbed wire that really does it for me. I very rarely do you see barbed wire portrayed for what it is, which is a horrific defense mechanism, and seeing it on the Pyramid Head's body tearing at the flesh and stuff is just incredible. Absolutely fantastic. Easily one of the best skins in the game, in my humble opinion. But with that said, we are already at the end of the video. I say already, but we're 23 odd minutes in, maybe almost 24. I don't know what else to say about Pyramid Head. He is a horror icon through and through, and he is more than worthy to be in this game, which is basically a Hall of Fame for horror icons at this point. We're just missing Jason, right? But anyways, with all of that said, I hope you have a good evening, afternoon, morning, etc. Like, comment and subscribe if you feel so inclined. And the next video in the DBD-a-thon series shall be on none other than the Blight.